And we are live. Welcome back to another episode of Northstar Talks Politics. As I look at this beautiful screensaver, I rather like it and I find it calming. At least this isn't a video I could really think of a good graphic or web page to show. I like to show informational web pages. Someday I'll put together more advanced graphics, but information, right? Use the visual aspect of this media so it's not just a podcast. This time, I couldn't think of something. I suppose I could have created a text document outline and spoke along and used it both as a reminder for myself, but also so you guys could see the structure of what I was going to say. I decided not to do that. I'll probably redo this like many of these political videos someday in the future, with at least that and maybe more stuff, maybe just stock footage like a lot of political channels seem to do, which is almost the same as looking at a screensaver but more flashy. So I wanted to talk briefly about something near and dear to my heart. What is freedom? And do we live in a free society in the United States? I could dodge the question for a while, stretch this out, but I'll start with the answer the second. My analysis is no. We aren't free in the U.S. We're not more free, because freedom is a sliding scale, but maybe no country has ever been perfectly free ever in history, but we are not more free. Sure, there are individual aspects like pushing for the rights of LGBTQ individuals where some might say we're better off. Although, are you even there? The U.S. falls well short of what it claims to. One of the reasons, for instance, is you have to look at the whole picture of things. LGBTQ individuals are much more likely in the United States with its right-wing religious fundamentalists who are part of the society, whether they're part of the government or not. They're part of the society, and they are oppressive to these individuals. They will often kick out LGBTQ youth, and they'll end up homeless. And the U.S. has a terrible welfare system full of holes. I worked in a volunteered rather in a homeless shelter that dealt with homeless youth, so I can speak to this. These are individuals who sometimes got kicked out when they came out of the closet by shitty parents, and the system does nothing to help these people. They're homeless because there aren't, even though there's nominally supposed to be cash benefit programs, they're terrible. There's a million ways they screw people out of it. For instance, Social Security and SSI, which sometimes they can qualify if, for instance, they have a mental health issue like severe depression that developed after, being kicked out. Even if they are qualified for it, has an asset limit, $1,000. That's not enough to pay rent in many parts of the country. You're not allowed to have enough money in your bank account to pay rent from this. You can immediately see how this doesn't allow people to maintain housing. Actual housing assistance programs have waiting lines of sometimes 8, 9, 10 years. John Oliver did an excellent video on that, an excellent episode on his last tweet today, if you want to hear. But making fun of how once there was a relay race for who could get housing assistance, where they had dozens of people line up and running to the basic gist of it is there isn't nearly enough of that help, and we neglect the public housing programs in the United States, and housing vouchers many landlords won't take because of how the system is designed to be second rate and to make the landlords not want to take these programs, among other things. Not paying out well enough or consistently, quickly enough, not to mention stigma and biases against those people who are on the programs. Excuse me. There are state welfare programs. I'm counting one of these right now myself, where the person tells me I have to February 10th of some documents, but then they send me a checklist, but then they don't say how, and they imply they're going to do it by email, by nothing by email. I eventually get something by snail mail They didn't tell me I was going to receive it by snail mail, mind you, and it arrived late. They themselves acknowledge this and the thing out late. And it says I have to January 31st to do this checklist of documents. Now, they told me I had to February 10th, and they sent out, when they spoke to me, for like a phone review for the program, and February 10th with the possibility of extending 15 days, and they sent the thing out late, which already would have put me in a situation, especially because I have long COVID, which makes it difficult for me to find the energy to get stuff done quickly. But then when they eventually send the stupid thing out and they can't be reached by phone, I call the phone number and I either get on hold if I call the main number, if I call the specific person, it just goes straight to voicemail, or rings like once, goes to voice twice, three times, it just goes to voicemail every time is the point. No one picks up. And it says to January 31st. And it has different lists of documents when the person told me. And it says that they need a letter from saying I applied to SSI, even though I'm over the asset limit for it. Even though the person said on the phone that basically they could check electronically and see if I'd applied to it or not. So do they need it or not? And how am I supposed to get a bloody letter when everything's moved to electronic? And you can see that the system is designed to be confusing, stressful, screw people over, delay them getting help, and then when they get help, not give them enough help. Meanwhile, the United States has a larger prison population than any other country on Earth, and per capita, one of the very highest on Earth. Sometimes, I think before there was a lot of nonviolent drug offenders released recently, it was the highest. But I think there's now one or two very oppressive countries in like Latin America or something that may have surpassed us. It is and remains higher than the Soviet Union ever had in per capita prison population. Then China, all these countries we claim weren't free or aren't free, have a smaller prison population in the U.S. Isn't that funny? No, they don't kill them. In fact, many times capital punishment is banned or not routinely done in many countries that we criticize as supposedly being so oppressive, but they have a smaller prison population in the United States. We kill more prisoners than they do. It's not a matter of killing people so they don't have prisoners. It's a matter of the United States is an oppressive system with cops who will frame people, with judges who will give excessively long sentences, with a system that is basically guilty until proven rich, with lawyers who are inaccessible, with supposedly legal aid systems that will only allow you a certain amount of help, or often in terms of hours a year, will often just reject cases without telling people why. I dealt with this myself and trying to get the help with my university, which screwed me over with when I developed long COVID. I had been a perfect straight A student. I was suddenly sick, wasn't able to finish the last semester classes, had what would have been B's based on the work I'd already done, but it was you must finish the final project with automatic F thing, and they turned those grades into F's rather than letting me withdraw from the classes because it'd been past the withdrawal deadline when I got long COVID, and they didn't have a retroactive withdrawal policy, which they should have done. Many universities have specifically for this kind of thing, for unexpected illnesses, things like car accidents, family deaths, so that if something happens late in a semester that you could never have foreseen, you can still withdraw from the class and not get an F. That's how it's supposed to be. This university doesn't have it. We're not open to even considering revising their policy on that. Screwed me over, and then when I reached out to legal, they just said we can't help you, and they wouldn't say why. When I reported it to the U.S. Attorney General's office as a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act also, they wouldn't say why they couldn't help me either. I suspect it's because I hadn't qualified for SSDI yet, so they could say, oh, you don't have a disability legally except that process is intentionally dragged out and has a zillion things of paperwork, and with long COVID is often denying people disability who are definitely disabled. And in my case, they'll screw me over work credits because they're missing more than half the jobs that I've ever worked. So even though I should have enough work credits, they'll say you don't have enough work credits, that you're too short when I should be substantially over the limit. But then they have a system where you can't update the work history that they have if it's been more than 40 months since that job. It's like, what? Most people are looking at this are going to find out that they're missing a job that they worked like 5, 6, 7 years ago. No one is going to be checking the Social Security Administration's website and look at this obscure document every 3 to 4 years that they don't even know they should be checking. That's not going to happen. It's designed to screw people over. The United States is not a free country. Arguably, in fact, the wrong side won the Cold War. That might be a controversial statement for some, especially the Eastern Europeans. The Soviet Union was so oppressive. The Soviet Union was particularly oppressive to Eastern Europeans. So if you're Eastern European, my heart goes out to the things that your grandparents might have suffered. You did not live through it, so don't tell me you did. The people who claim they did at this point are liars, because most people actually who are on YouTube are not grandparents' generation. They're younger people. They were born after this happened. Their lives don't suck because of communism. Their lives suck because of the post-communist crisis, the way that the former Soviet and Warsaw bloc countries were screwed over after communism ended, which was actually the U.S. doing something impressive to the rest of the world. Which brings me to another point. The U.S. not only doesn't respect its own citizens' freedom, beats protesters, throws people in jail for bullshit reasons, keeps them in jail for a long time, has systemic poverty. The United States makes healthcare and education ridiculously expensive. The United States also doesn't enable other countries to be free. If another country, for instance, tries to raise the minimum wage in Latin America, the U.S. does coup or government regime change operations like the Clintons helped do in Haiti when they tried to raise the minimum wage in the country and implement stricter labor laws. Environmental protection, same thing. If the U.S. Companies own, say, the oil country, a country tries to nationalize it because this oil was stolen generations ago by literally the British often, or the French, coming and invading the country and setting up a colony, and then they maintained control of the oil when the colony was given air quote independence, even though they don't have much economic independence. And then eventually the U.S. bought the oil rights from those French or British companies. So if they try and take back what was stolen from them generations ago, and that's many of these countries dispute the perverted logic of capitalism, that someone has the right to own the resources, the means of production, just because often they were born rich and they were able to buy stocks from a young age. And there's this whole fucked up thing with that. The U.S. will invade or do a regime change or assassinate. The U.S. doesn't let other countries doesn't be free, isn't let its own citizens be free, and then we claim we're the freest country in the world. That's bullshit. We are oppressive and one of the great evils in the world, and it's ironic that we go around calling other countries the axis of evil. What we can do is, of course, try and reform things, change them, improve them. Anything more is doomed to just get you in trouble and not achieve its goals because of the incredible apparatuses of state oppression. Even protests will get you thrown in jail for peaceful protests that you should have a constitutional right to in the United States. But you got to keep trying to change things. And ultimately, capitalism must end, because the source of all evil, the source of what's fucking up the United States system, is that a handful of billionaires own the politicians, corrupt the system through the politicians. The bureaucrats are forced to do evil things because the politicians set funding and regulations and rules that then the bureaucrats have to enforce. They're bad. The police victimize people because the politicians push these tough on crime rhetoric, and they fund the police in such a way that incentivizes and behave the way they do. The military and the CIA do what they do abroad because the politicians basically order them to. The problem is the politicians, and the problem is the politicians are owned by billionaires, which is why I'm a democratic socialist, which is why I say nationalize all the big companies so there are no billionaires who are doing this. In fact, seize the assets of the billionaires, seize their ridiculous amount of stocks, reduce them to being just millionaires. That I think that's more than enough money for any human being, and that's all the money they could reasonably say that they've earned through their own labor rather than exploiting others. Of course, the U.S. will say, oh, that's a violation of property rights. We've defined property rights in this country in such a way that it protects these people. That definition needs to be revised. Otherwise, capitalism will destroy the world through climate change, and the U.S. will continue running an empire that oppresses and mutilates and murders so many people around the world, and it will just get worse and worse and worse until either the system collapses or there's some kind of revolt or invasion or military World War III that brings the U.S. to its knees. And none of those are pleasant options. It's much better if we change our ways. So, anyways, I wish you all the best. Take care of each other. Be kind to yourselves. And may you always find a guiding star to lead you home. Adieu.